Good morning, everybody. We'll get this underway while we're still all connected. I declare the meeting open at 9:38 and acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and are joined by people from lands around the state. That we acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Session Panels Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. My name is Clayton Hine. I'm the presiding member for today's meeting. With me I have Dale Page, the deputy presiding member, Tony Arias, the specialist member, Councillor Tyrrell Gardner from the Shire of Dardanup, and Councillor Stacey Gillespie from the Shire of Dardanup. And later on we'll be joined by councillors from the City of Kalgoorlie. I have apologies from Deputy Mayor Kirsty Della from the City of Kalgoorlie and Councillor Wayne Johnson, also from the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder. There are no members on leave of absence, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving on to Part B, can I have a declaration of due consideration? Can I have confirmation that panel members have duly considered all the material before them, please, just by show of hands? Okay, thank you. You froze there for a while. Disclosures of interest. Councillors, this matter go to a council meeting, I gather it probably did from the disclosure from Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, confirm I've got an impartiality interest, as I previously said at a council meeting that was dealing with the responsible authority report for this item.
Okay. Does the same apply to you, Councillor Gillespie? Yes. Okay, then thank you. I'm happy for you to continue to participate in the meeting. I'll just move to, sorry. Sorry, item 3, Form 1 DAP applications. There are none. Form 2 applications, nil. And SAP reconsiderations, nil. Moving to item 5.1, the lot 2 Banksia Road, Crooked Brook, the landfill waste cells. We have one presenter here, Mr. Julius Skinner. For 3 minutes to do your presentation.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm not sure from the video there, Mr. John Mulholland anyway was intending to at least be present to answer any questions. If there is anybody who won't be making any presentation, I'll be dealing. This comes back before the DAP to reconsider certain conditions, or 3 conditions of the approval that was granted back in February of 2024, conditions 2, 4 and 10. That approval. As to condition 2, there's an updated landscaping management plan. That's what took the majority of the time past in dealing with this matter, but obviously the applicant supports the recommendation in the RDAP council resolution to approve the updated management plan that's now before you. So that matter should be largely resolved with. As to condition 10, there's what's been recommended for you. The applicant sought to delete the whole of the condition. What's been recommended is to delete paragraphs A to C, but leave paragraph D. As noted in the presentation information that was submitted, set out our reasons for opposing that paragraph D as well in the additional information that was supported in paragraph 37 of that. We maintain that position in the sense of the condition now just simply requires an annual report to be given, which is covered by other conditions and by other requirements of the landscaping management plan and other matters. So to require that as an additional condition of approval to us seems to be overkill, but it's not something going to die in the ditch over it. It's information that will be provided in the event. We always like to try and avoid having surplus irrelevant conditions imposed as the meaning of them gets adjusted over time. The more important issue, though, or one of more significant concern, is in relation to condition 4. And we have a slightly unusual situation. The RAR actually recommends the deletion of the second sentence of condition 4 and provides the reasons for that, which is what the applicant was seeking. But the council came to a different view when it considered the RAR, and so the recommendation made to the RDAP is not to delete that condition, but the RAR recommends deleting that sentence of the condition. Now, just to provide a little bit more by way of background, the sentence that's in question talks about internal circulation of all vehicles must not encroach on the 20-metre wide landscaped buffer. Now, I always sought some clarification about that because there are existing internal circulation ways within 20 metres of the boundary at least, and there are areas where there is a 20-metre landscape buffer, there are areas where there isn't a 20-metre landscape buffer. The clarification that came back was that the Shire's position at least was that the condition required no internal circulation roads within 20 metres of the boundary of the property, and that causes a significant problem. Because, as I say, there are existing and approved internal circulation roads from previous applications within 20 metres of the boundary of the property. Those internal circulation roads were also shown on the previous approved landscaping plan, and they are shown on the now about to be approved replacement landscaping plan. And that plan goes even further and shows that there is actually landscaping on the inside of those roads. So you've got the boundary of the property, you've got the road, the internal road that's essentially hard up against the boundary, but there's then landscaping on the inside of the road. So the effect of having the 20-metre landscaping is still there, and that's what's acknowledged in the RAR, but the internal road is where it is at the moment, which is closer than 20 metres to the boundary. So really, for exactly the same reasons that are put in our application, to amend the condition, the further information that was supported, and indeed for the reasons that are set out in the RAR, we seek to have that second sentence deleted. It's now, not only is it inconsistent with previous approvals, but it's inconsistent with the landscaping plan that the Shire has recommended approval of. So we'd say, as on its face, it would require all of these internal roads to be rerouted, and it would require another new landscaping plan, which we say is just not something that should be followed.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Skinner? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Skinner, just to embellish a little bit on something you've covered in your submission and you've just spoken to it. So in your view, we're talking about condition 10E, the bit of the condition 10 that the Shire would like to retain. Does condition 71 of the DUA approval adequately cover the effectiveness of those vegetation buffers, thereby negating the need for condition 10E? Could you just talk a little bit more to that, why you feel that adequately addresses that?
Let me just refresh my memory of that condition. I don't know as I actually have it with me. Mr. Mulholland, are you intimately familiar with that condition, or do you happen to have it with you?
I can pull it up quick, but it would take a few minutes. Like it was it was 70. Sorry, which condition was it?
It's I'm not sure which. It's part of condition. So your submission is basically saying that condition 71 of the DUA license approval covers all of condition 10, thereby negating the need for condition 10E to be retained. I just want a little bit more information on that from your perspective, please. If you're not able to access it, I will ask the Shire officers if we have them with us.
Yeah, I'll bring it up, but I don't have it on me right now.
We'll come back to that. Further questions?
Yes, presiding member. Mr. Skinner, just going back to condition 4, you indicated that the approved landscaping plan shows the access ways. So are there additional access ways other than the ones shown on the landscape plans proposed? Are they all existing landscape?
There were no additional internal access roads proposed as part of this application. They're all existing roads.
Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Holling. Again, that's certainly my understanding.
So just to be clear, the plans that were lodged for approval show existing access ways.
Correct.
And there's no further access. So if the applicant proposed additional access ways within the existing 20-metre buffer areas, that would require modification to the approval, correct?
Yes, certainly. There were no changes to the existing approved internal access ways as part of this application. We just had the condition, or the second sentence of the condition, that says no internal access roads within 20 metres of the boundary, and there are existing approved access roads within 20 metres of the boundary. So on its face, and this is what the clarification Cleanaway saw, did that apply to the existing road? Because if it just meant no new one, we're happy with it. But we understood the Shire was saying, no, it means all existing internal access roads had to be moved.
Thank you. And just a follow-up, and I'll put this question to the Shire's officers, but in reading the RAR, it would seem that the only area where that's where there's an access way within the 20 metres is Zone 4.
Yes, I think there are a couple of Zone 4 is essentially runs around part of the boundaries. There are a couple of areas where there is an access road that's within 20 metres that's formed part of that Zone 4. And I think there's a couple of areas where there's some other existing infrastructure that's within that 20 metres. It's not an access road, but it is a piece of infrastructure or shed, I think, that is within that 20 metres that's also therefore not landscaping. But it is certainly that landscaping plan shows the existing internal roads.
Thank you.
Can I presume that the existence of those internal or those roads within the buffer doesn't diminish the effectiveness of the buffer?
Well, as we pointed out in our additional information, and I think as the Shire acknowledged in its RAR, the landscaping, but the 20-metre landscaping buffer is largely an issue for the visual impact of the landfill on adjoining properties. And by having the 20-metre landscaping on the inside of the access road rather than the outside of the access road achieves exactly the same result in terms of the visual impact. And that was acknowledged in the RAR.
Further questions? Councillors? Yes, Councillor Gardner.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Skinner. I've got a few questions for you. You've said in your submission that, and you've acknowledged that you've got a lack of compliance here with that 20-metre buffer now with your zones. But then I look back at the landscaping picture, which is a nice picture with a nice straight line, particularly down the eastern, southern and western boundaries. As a percentage, because I'm really struggling to work out where you think you've achieved that 20-metre buffer or where you haven't because there's existing circulation roads, and the lack of really high definition resolution maps to be able to see where we've got that 20-metre buffer. As a percentage, what percentage do you reckon achieves that 20-metre buffer against the boundary? Or maybe even John may be the one to answer.
Off the top of my head, it'll be 100% on the eastern boundary, 100% on the western boundary, and 80% on the southern boundary. And where it's not meeting the 20%, I think the lowest it gets to is about 13, 14 off the top of my head, and it's kind of tapered. I thought it was actually detailed on the landscaping plan, but
I couldn't pick it up.
Yeah, but it's sort of tapered to around 13 at the lowest point. So, but probably 80% of it on that boundary.
Okay. Now that says on the table in the attachment there, it sort of mentions yes, no, some bigger, some smaller. And then, I mean, the southern boundary has been the issue, and that stormwater drainage plan which was approved back in 2021, also mentions the 20-metre buffer being required down that southern boundary. Sticking with that southern boundary, back in 21 it was discovered that the boundary wasn't where everyone thought it was, and was actually 1.5 metres to 2 metres further north. Is that moving of where the boundary, where everyone thought it was, to where it actually is that caused a few compliance issues with this 20-metre buffer on the southern boundary?
No. So from the last time we met with the DAP panel, I thought the outcome was to confirm timing for us to deliver. And the timing of it was relatively straightforward because we'd actually planted it all, and so the timing was it's done. And so wherever available, so where there's not infrastructure encroaching on the boundary, we're making it bigger. Like, it doesn't, we've got nothing to go in there, so it doesn't worry us to make it 30 metres, for example. So where we can, we'll make it bigger and thicken it up. But for example, the leachate ponds can't be moved, and we can't make it 20 metres. And then directly east to the leachate ponds, there's one of the main haul road, which is, I think that is about 15 metres off the top of my head, and it can't be moved because there's already a cell adjacent with the drainage infrastructure and all your stormwater takeaway. So they like, there's some pieces of infrastructure that physically can't move, but wherever else is available. So, for example, at the eastern end of the site, we've planted that like where there are no cells and roads, we've planted that all out to 20 metres, same as in the west. Where possible, down in the western side of that southern boundary, that's been planted out. I believe we've taken Ashwin around to Ashwin Nair around to inspect that. Happy to take anyone anytime if they want to have a look.
Further questions? Yes, Councillor Gillespie.
Yeah, hi. Just clarifying. So we've heard mention that it's a main haul road and the access ways can't be moved, but as Mr. Skinner said, the whole sort of justification for the buffer, the 20-metre buffer, is to improve the amenity for the surrounding towns and landowners. And yet you've just admitted you've got a main haul road through there. So to me, that's sort of conflicting. Can't hear you, John. You're on mute.
We're talking about the southern road, which is actually adjacent to the state forest. So if you wouldn't, and it's also got it's got quite a significant batter as a part of that 20-metre buffer zone. There's actually quite a significant batter, like probably 5 or 6 metres high, that joins the fire break on that state forest southern boundary.
Okay, thanks.
I presume that road that you're talking about now, John, is one of the roads that was in the original approval.
The sealed.
Yeah, correct. It's sealed. It's a part of the part of a previous approval.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, Tony?
Mr. Skinner, just clarification. Item E of condition 10, I think you made a comment that it's a duplication of the landscape plan. Does a landscape plan require some sort of reporting process?
The landscape plan certainly requires compliance, and it talks about, in fact, a lot of the landscaping already having been done and just being maintained from here on. I think, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but if it amounts to not much more than a brief report as to planting that's been done over the past 12 months, it's not something that anyone's going to die in the ditch over. It seems to be a rather unusual thing to make a specific condition of planning approval when we've got an approved land. Most time you've got an approved landscaping plan, you have a condition that requires that to be implemented and maintained. And if there's an issue about whether it's being implemented and maintained, the local government has its rights of recourse and can request information, but to have a specific condition of planning approval that does nothing more than require reporting on a plan that's the subject of another condition. I mean, we could duplicate that condition for every plan that's referred to in here, and there just isn't much of a need for it anymore.
Yeah, it just, my point is that the landscaping plan covers an end use, and given this is a long approval period, it doesn't require any sort of reporting or maintenance.
I think the landscaping plan does refer to ongoing maintenance of plant. It doesn't just the initial planting. There's obviously an ongoing maintenance requirement associated with it. So it is required as part of the landscaping plan. I don't think from memory there is a specific requirement in the landscaping plan for reporting. If there is, that will obviously be complied with. There isn't a specific requirement in there for annual reporting. It's certainly something the Shire could request at any point, and if the landscaping plan hasn't been complied with, that would need action on the part of Cleanaway, whether or not there's a condition.
Just ask a follow-up question on that, and it might be one for the Shire officers as well. So if we keep that condition 10E and there is an annual report on the effectiveness of the landscaping, which is planted in accordance and maintained in accordance with the landscape plan. But if that annual report shows that perhaps that approved landscaping isn't quite achieving the outcomes that it was intended, then what? You're adhering to the landscape plan, but then what is the ability of the Shire to say, well, even though you're implementing the landscape plan, it's not really doing what we'd hoped. So can they then ask you to do more, or are they bound by that landscape plan? So I guess what I'm getting to is if they can't actually ask for more than what's in the landscaping plan, if the landscaping is not effective in that annual reporting, then why should we keep 10E anyway? That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's all those. I mean, a landscaping plan isn't literally plant X tree here, X tree here, X tree here. It's in relatively general terms. The condition only requires monitoring of the planted vegetation buffers. It's not even 100% sure exactly what that is intended to cover. But if plants are surviving, or if, put it this way, in extremes, if all the plants planted one year or have been planted died, there would be a need to do something more on the landscaping plan because it would no longer be being implemented. That is one example of something, I suppose, that might fall within 10E that you'd have to report back. But if they've died, then the landscaping plan needs to be complied with anyway.
I guess I'm asking for the opposite. What if those plants don't die? So they planted, you need to plant that there, that there, that there, and those plants grow and they do flourish. But that annual report shows, well, that may be so, but they're still not actually creating that visual buffer that was anticipated by the landscape plan. How does the Shire then say, well, you've adhered to that landscape plan, but we want you to do more? They can't do that outside of the approval, can they?
Correct. The landscaping plan defines what needs to be done.
So that's why I'm questioning what is the purpose of 10E if you've got a compliance process anyway, and then that will pick up, as you say, the if there's not adherence to the landscape plan, or if the plants are dying, but it doesn't really cater for the purpose of that condition. If everything goes to plan but it still doesn't achieve the outcomes, then I wonder what the purpose of 10E would be. Why have it if you can't enforce change through it?
Probably in furious agreement.
I'm just checking if that's your understanding of it, and I'll ask this Shire as well.
It's certainly part of it, yes. There's a question as to what is the purpose. I suppose perhaps rather slightly more elegant way of putting what we put in that paragraph 37 of the additional conditions is that there's certainly a requirement to carry out landscaping in accordance with the landscaping plan. That's been approved, or will be approved in the new landscaping plan. Reporting on it doesn't seem to serve any real purpose. You're either complying with it or you're not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of the presenter? No, thank you. We'll move on to the officers. Who have we got? Is Ashman online there?
It was requested. accepting the promotion.
Mr. Chair, I can see Ashwin's still sitting as an attendee, not as a panelist.
Yeah, he has been invited to be a panelist, but he keeps declining that invitation.
Okay.
It's just accepted then.
He's just joining us, I believe.
Good morning.
Are you able to turn your camera on, please?
Good morning.
Morning.
I was pressing the wrong button. My apologies. Good morning, Presiding Member. No.
Ashwin, would you like to make any general comments at this stage, or just go straight to questions?
There was a couple of things there. I think the first thing is when we talk about landscaping, when we talk about smaller lots, it's not uncommon to have a condition to ensure that the landscaping is implemented and then maintained in perpetuity. But this is in a greater scale than what you would get in a normal commercial residential development. And the success of the impacts of the development of visual amenity is really as a result of the landscaping, the buffers, and also more broadly, the landscape rehabilitation plan once the cell's ultimately completed. So I think to pursue a condition with on approval without monitoring the success of those buffers, which play an integral role in visual amenity, but also intersect with dust management and litter management, I think that would result in greater impacts in the short to medium term until such time the broader area is rehabilitated. The Shire really stands on its position that that condition E is retained. Broadly, I just want to advise that the LDP actually talks about a primary access route to the north, and that is in one of the zones, intersection zone 4A and zone 1. Just to clarify, I know there was discussion about access routes. The LDP ultimately formalizes a access to the site through there and a primary track to the north. In terms of the circulation areas, I firmly believe that the LDP, the intent of the LDP is still met through the amended landscape plan. It still will provide, once the landscaping is implemented, will provide that screening at that more human scale, but ultimately long term, it's about the layers. And once you get that buffer, that layer of the first 20 meters, or albeit amended to the landscaping plan, and then when you consider it in the broader landscaping plan, it provides that layered effect of landscaping when the site's being viewed. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of Ashwin?
Thank you, Ashwin. Just as a follow-up, and you would have heard my question before. So I understand your intent, but behind wanting the annual report to assess the effectiveness of the landscaping buffer, or the landscaping in achieving that management of visual impact. But I guess my question to Mr. Skinner, and perhaps you can answer it, is what would you do in the scenario where the landscaping plan is adhered to and the planting does grow as expected, but that annual report shows that it doesn't quite achieve the outcome of managing that visual impact in the way that you had hoped? Would you then seek to get the applicant to plant landscaping in addition to that, which is approved under the landscape plan? I guess I'm asking the so what question. What if that annual report shows that that the applicant's done the right thing, but it's not achieving the outcome? What would the purpose of 10E then be, given you have a separate compliance function where if they don't adhere to the landscaping plan and the landscaping dies, you can actually just get them to to sort it anyway under your compliance function?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. The Shire will be approving the landscape plan on the basis that it is satisfied that if implemented in its entirety and it is successful in its entirety, it will serve the purpose in managing impacts. So the monitoring is more about the survival of the plants and ultimately ensuring the landscape plan is delivered as proposed and ultimately as approved.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? My apologies.
Yes, it does. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you, Ashwin. Tony?
Thank you, presiding member. Ashwin, the council has approved the landscape plan. Yeah, I'm just going through it, and there is a section around maintenance, and I know we're discussing the need for an annual report, but the actual landscape plan does talk about a 36-month maintenance program, an implementation report, and actually makes references to 6 monthly reviews and monitoring, replanting if it's not successful. So I'm just wondering what Part E does that perhaps the approved landscaping plan through the maintenance section doesn't achieve. It would appear that the actual landscaping plan is much more detailed than point E.
Thank you, member. Through the chair, there's the one I've seen that, and I'm looking at 3.8 of the plan. It does have some self-monitoring and self-assessment of what's being identified and implemented through landscaping. But all that really does is allow us for them to report to us to ensure that the landscaping is being delivered as per the plan and the success of the planting is being monitored, because that ultimately intersects with that visual amenity impact. So it allows us to also, one, understand from a stage perspective what's occurring, and two, allows us to undertake enforcement.
Okay, but the approved landscaping plan requires that anyway. And it goes further because it actually talks about the possibility of replanting where it's not successful, which point E doesn't actually cover at all.
No, just in my experience, self-monitoring, self-assessment isn't as so self-monitoring and self-assessment doesn't really have the same outcome as compliance process on the Plan Development Act. So we'd prefer that to be the case, whereby we have that recall through that condition to ensure that self-assessment, that self-monitoring comes back to the Shire to review. And it's very similar to some of the work I've done with extractive industries, but they had to provide us an update of what they've undertaken, including landscape management, to ensure the amenity impacts are being managed. Member?
So can I just ask a follow-up? But doesn't your compliance process allow you to do that anyway? So if they don't adhere to the landscaping plan of requirement of that self-assessment and reporting, then you can chase that up anyway without having a separate condition requiring that, can't you?
That's correct, member. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Any further questions of Ashwin? No, yes, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding member. Ashwin, as you've stated, when you rely on the proponent to do the compliance, would it be better that if they are compliant, they can celebrate their success by submitting that report to council, that they've achieved the what we're trying to achieve with this landscaping through this plan? It doesn't seem, as has been stated, it's already being done through other process. As a councillor, I'd like to hear that it's being done, not have to go looking for it, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Is that what you're saying when you say we're relying on that compliance to come through from them?
Thank you for the question. Yes, through the chair, it's definitely been my approach when dealing with previous similar applications where there is that no problem, the self-monitoring and self-assessment, but that's to be reported back for the Shire to assess the the compliance with the condition, but also two, the success of the landscaping plan. So it's definitely been my approach in previous applications and previous projects. And in my experience, it's not uncommon for that approach as well. Thank you.
Further questions of Ashwin? Thank you, Ashwin. We'll move on. There's a recommendation, the RAR, at the front end of the RAR, which is the first one that I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for. Is there a mover for that recommendation?
Remember, could we deal with them individually?
Mr. Chair, I've got my hand up, not so much as a mover, but just we've had some questions to some presenters, but I'm struggling with visualising what is in and out of this buffer zone, and I've had the opportunity to have a look over the site. Haven't been there for probably 3 years now. But panel members, have any of you actually had the opportunity to have a site visit of this site? Because it is quite a complex site, and I'm just struggling with. Yeah. Okay. On that basis, I'd like to move a procedural motion that we defer this item, subject to a site visit by all panel members. Probably, if you need padding out, to have a procedural motion to defer, we need to have a date to come back. So in a month's time, and have a site visit for the 5 of us, so we can actually look at it without having to rely on the papers, because I'm struggling to visualise the tracks, the buffers, and some of this infrastructure down, especially on that southern boundary.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gardner has moved a procedural motion to defer for a period of, I think we need more than a month, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, whatever it needs. Yep.
For up to 90 days.
Yep.
Up to 90 days. So that will give time to allow panel members to undertake a site inspection. Is there a seconder for the procedural motion? Councillor Gillespie is seconding that.
Yeah, happy to second.
There's no further debate on that. I'll put that procedural motion. All in favour? Against? Okay, going back to the responsible authority recommendation at the beginning of the RAR, which includes retention of 10E and the inclusion of the amendment to condition 4. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Gardner, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Gillespie. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, as per the RAR, yep, we're all agreeing, or the proponents and the Shire and the responsible authority recommendation does agree on part 1 with the landscaping plan coming in. There is some discussion around the progress report. I feel that it's not too onerous on the applicants to provide that progress report on the vegetation buffers that they've achieved over the previous 12 months. It is part of trying to achieve that mitigation of the visual dust and rubbish issues that are occurring at the site. And as a local government authority, we're trying to represent our community in trying to get some achievement of that amenity clawback that we're trying to get. And as to part 2, to refusing to amend condition 4, but including the wording to prevent circulation of vehicles in that landscape boundary. Yeah, there's some infrastructure there, but yeah, it's once again that that internal road is causing dust to leave the site, so we need that 20-metre buffer. There may have to be some extra work in tidying it up. We've heard from John about the settlement ponds there, that they're actually able to use those batters on that and the road goes around it. But as I said previously, I'm struggling to visualise how we can have roads going in and out of a landscape buffer when it's trying to achieve a result. Yeah, it's a long history on this site, and we're trying to get some conditions that will mitigate those those amenity issues with the visual dust and rubbish. So in that line, I propose that the responsible authority report as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Gillespie, a seconder.
Yes, and following on from Councillor Gardner's comments, I don't see why, we should be just relying on self-monitoring. I think it's not onerous for them to just flick an email with their reports to the Shire for awareness that they are actually carrying out the self-monitoring. The 20-metre landscape boundary, we need to keep that in. It is quite a large site that is impacting on the amenity of a lot of aspects out there. So if we can keep that, I just think we need to really make sure it doesn't matter that they might have a bit more on one side and a bit less on the other. I think the point is 20 metres around the whole thing to do what we can to protect that site.
Thank you. Speakers against that or for?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, I will talk to, I think there's consensus around condition 2, so I won't discuss that. In terms of condition 10, my view, having reviewed the landscape plan again, is that in fact the landscaping plan has much more significant and onerous requirements than point E would require anyway. Condition 2 also provides a very clear statement that the proponent's responsible for adhering not only to the landscaping plan, but the dust management plan and those other management plans that have been approved as part of the approval. So I don't think point E achieves very much at all. In terms of condition 4, as has been pointed out, the existing approved access way, we've heard and read in the RAR that the intent of the landscape buffer is achieved. And there's no proposal to provide any additional roadways, which would require a modification to the current approval. So for that reason, I wouldn't support the current motion.
Thank you. Further speakers?
Yes, please, Presiding Member, and I'm wondering if you wish to deal with it differently, please shout, but I'm wondering if I could move, and I'll talk to condition 2. I think condition 2, there's no dispute about, happy to approve the updated landscaping plan. Most of the plan remains unchanged, and given the amendments really only provide clarity around the intent of zone 4 and the width of each zone section, it's a positive outcome, so happy with that. But I'd like to move an amendment to delete condition 10. I'm not sure if you have a second before I speak to it.
I think we will. So you're removing point 2 of the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, Tony, thank you.
Thank you. I support, as per the officer's report and council's decision, the amendments to condition 10, noting that the matters outlined in 10A to D are already covered by condition 71 in the dual licence that applies to the development. But I don't support the retention of condition 10E. I think this can be dealt with via the review mentioned by Member Arias during question time, and he just referred to it again. And I think it can be dealt with via the Shire's normal compliance processes. I understand that this is a large site, and whilst I've not visited the site, I think there is adequate information in the report and the attached technical reports that gives me enough information to make this or form this view, I believe. I think that it is a big site and it's a complex site, but an annual review by the applicant as to whether or not the landscaping is achieving the outcomes hoped for by the landscape plan, I think it might give the Shire some comfort, but it is a requirement that the applicant will meet. And if for some reason on one particular year, the applicant's own report suggests that the landscaping is not achieving the outcomes that it was meant to or hoped for in the landscape plan, the Shire really has no ability to compel them to do more than what the landscape plan suggested anyway. And if that annual report produced by the applicant shows that the landscaping is dying or the landscaping was not planted in accordance with the landscape plan, I would suggest that's probably not going to happen, but the Shire can pick that up anyway through its normal compliance process, which I suggest would have quite a bit of weight. So I don't think there's a need to retain condition 10E, and therefore I think I'm happy to delete the whole of condition 10.
Tony, seconder.
Thank you. I would simply reiterate that in my view, the landscaping plan provides a much more rigorous requirement in terms of reporting and provides the opportunity for compliance.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against the amendment? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, as during the moving of the initial motion and discussion, as a Shire, we'd like to see that condition E to remain. It's to go looking for that information right through the reviews of the landscape development plan. That's fine, but we're just looking for some concise reporting on plantings and where they're at on an annual basis. And as I said before, it would be good that if the proponent was able to celebrate some success in that area. It is quite a visual impacting site down there. And yeah, some landscaping done well, and then that report presented to council would be something we could celebrate and share with our community. So I'd like to see it stay, remain in the motion.
Thank you. Further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Gillespie? No. Okay. Yes, look, I'm more than happy to support the deletion of that part or the condition. I think it was said earlier that there was like a so what at the end of so we get a monitoring report, so what? It doesn't really take it any further other than being we've planted so many trees and we've done this and done that. The action or the compliance all occurs within the condition on the landscaping plan itself. So that's where the monitoring and the compliance needs to occur. I also acknowledge that while I haven't been to the site, I think the technical information here is more than adequate for us to come to a conclusion like this. So I'm more than happy to support the deletion of that part of the recommendation. Back to Dale Page to wind up the vote.
Nothing further on that particular amendment.
Okay, I'll put that amendment. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member. I would also like to move a second amendment to amend condition 4 to delete the second sentence. Reads, in circulation of all vehicles must not encroach on the 20-metre landscape boundary interface of the property.
Okay, I'll seek a seconder for the deletion of that. Tony, thank you.
Presiding member, Look, previous approvals and subsequent development mean that internal vehicle tracks are already within the 20-metre landscape strip, and we are told that no new tracks are proposed as part of this particular approval. So the fact that there is already infrastructure within the strip, the fact that there is adequate landscaping either side of the track in certain location, and the fact that to use this approval to try and adjust the reality of the site and previous approvals is not appropriate. And yes, the local development plan contains that wording, but the panel needs to have due regard to the provisions of the local development plan. We're not bound by those provisions, and in this sense, in this case, I think common sense should prevail. I'm comfortable that the updated information has been provided in the landscaping plan, particularly that demonstrates that the objective of the provision is still being met. So happy to delete that second sentence as requested.
Tony.
Very briefly, the approved landscaping plan acknowledges the current access ways, and the LDP provision for the buffer we've heard is being attended to by a majority of the site, not wholly, but so the intent of providing buffer is being achieved. So I'm satisfied that is appropriate.
Thank you. Speakers against? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, speaking against the motion to remove that part of the original motion. Look, we're told there's no new roads planned, but I'm just wondering what rigidity we've got to maintain what is there, and there will be no further incursions on that buffer. It may be a question we can ask Ashwin if there is some documentation that defines what is in place now, so there is no increase in incursion into that buffer. The buffer is there to reduce the impacts of rubbish and dust, as well as the visual effect of that natural landscape out there. So to diminish any way from the 20 metres of that buffer diminishes the ability of mitigation on that effect on the amenity of those three types. So yeah, I'd prefer to see it stay in and find some way to define what's in place now so that there is no new roads appear in the buffer.
Thank you. Councillor Gillespie.
Yeah, I think this, you know, it is, I agree with Tyrrell that a site visit would have been useful, because I'm in the area, and, you know, looking at these maps and that they've provided, it's very different looking at some dots and some grainy pictures on a report rather than actually being there, seeing the site, seeing the impact. So it's disappointing that we couldn't arrange a site visit for all, just to have a look at the impact of the, you know, what would happen if this 20-metre buffer is continued to be encroached upon, and in areas it already has. So speaking against removing that, I think we need to hold on to little what we can with this site.
Thank you. I support the deletion of whole of condition 4. The fact is, there's a landscape plan. There are existing approved roads, access ways through that area. And I don't think we can use this as a backdoor way of trying to stop them using it. Any additional roads or access points would be the subject of further application. They can't just simply add roads or access ways to that buffer. So I'm more than happy that we have a current position, approved position already, and that should remain as it is. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I might just very briefly echo what you've said in closing on that. I understand the concern about making sure that no new tracks are developed, but that I don't think should be the purpose of putting a condition on an approval that basically runs at odds with what's already happened in previous approvals and what's on the site. If new tracks, if the applicant seeks to develop new tracks, they will need further approval. If they develop new tracks without approval, they will be subject to compliance processes under the P&D Act. If the Shire is unhappy with the tracks that are existing and the impact they have, that is unfortunate because they have already been approved and they've been implemented, and this approval can't undo that. So that's essentially, I understand that concern, but I don't think this condition is appropriate to try and manage that issue. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'll now put that amendment to delete that. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Still with you.
Probably not much more I need to add, presiding member. Thank you.
Tony, did you on the standing motion? Okay, sorry. Yes. All right. I'm happy with the motion as it now stands, and I think everything I wanted to say has been said anyway. So I will won't say any more on it at this stage. Back to the mover to wind up the debate. So that's back to Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And look, in moving the motion, I'll now be speaking against what's left. It doesn't give just having the LDP as the sole and the conditions removed takes away too much of the amenity requirement to be done. We did talk before the meeting when during the presenters, I did ask the question of that that boundary change. I'm just wondering what effects that's had on diminishing that buffer. And we've just removed a couple of items that have actually given that buffer some strength. So yeah, in closing, I'll probably be voting against will be voting against the motion as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I'll now put the motion as a substantive motion. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Okay, that ends that item. Thank you to Councillors Gardner and Gillespie for your attendance. And we'll move on to part C and welcome councillors from Kalgoorlie-Boulder. In fact, I'll seek a motion to adjourn for 5 minutes for a comfort break. Thank you, Tony, and I'll second that. Thank you. We haven't got a quorum there.
Can you? I can leave.
Sorry?
We have quorum.
We shall resume the meeting. So welcome to Councillors Turner and Winner. And I'll move to item 1, the declaration of due consideration. All members familiar with the material before you for this item? Can we have a show of hands, please? Yes, thank you very much. disclosures of interest. I've got one disclosure from Deputy Mayor Kirsty Dello, an indirect pecuniary interest. She's shareholder of landowner Northern Star, and so she's not participating in this morning's meeting. But did this matter go to a council meeting, councillors?
Yes, Presiding Officer, it did, and I can confirm that both myself and Councillor Turner declaring that we participated in the prior council meeting in relation to the item being determined at the meeting.
Okay, all right. So I'm determining that you will be able to participate in the meeting. So we'll move on then to the item itself, which is Kitchener Road, Mullingar. It's the proposed workforce accommodation facility. We have a number of presenters. So I've got Mr. Steve Allarding online. You're very dark there, Steve. And you've got 3 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Presiding Member. I'm sorry about the halo behind me. It's the sun that's streaming into the room, so my apologies for that. And good morning, everyone. And look, thank you for the opportunity to present today. I do have a PowerPoint, and I'm wondering if that could be put up because I intend to speak to that. And while that's being loaded, I should also mention that our office has been involved with other workforce accommodation proposals, which we acknowledge can provide very important contributions to industry. But as the DAP would be aware, each proposal must be looked at on the merits of the case. And in the specific context of this proposal, we prepared a detailed submission opposing it. And this was principally as it applied to its non-remote context, along with the scale of the development and the specific development shortcomings which had not been properly completed by the applicant for a bushfire emergency plan, resolving emergency access, and also an assessment of the availability of other accommodation in the area. And our view in the submission was that these were fundamental as to the capability of the development, and in the absence of those being addressed, the development should be approved by the DAP. So just looking at that first slide there, it just identifies the question of use and intensity of the development. We can see that where the X marks the spot, the site is zoned R10. It's also identified as a future growth area for Kalgoorlie. The expected density at R10, as you'd be aware, is 1,000 square metre lots. And when you've got a 12.5 hectare site and you take out roads, open space and the like, what you're expecting is a density of around less than 100 lots. So what we have here with an 800 bed facility is well in excess of the expectation of the intensity that was anticipated on that lot. And it was probably subject to the reason a lot of community opposition to it because of that intensity, because it was well beyond the intention of the intensity for that site. If we could have a look at the second slide, because the intensity also has implications for access issues and bushfire issues. And as you can see, the magenta colour represents bushfire prone. So the site itself is all bushfire prone, as is the surrounding land. There's currently no access. There's a proposal to include an access, which I'll come to shortly. But one of the things that is relevant for workers' accommodation is that they are designated as vulnerable facilities. And in the context of it being bushfire prone, this has specific requirements that must be met for safety of life, including the preparation of bushfire emergency plans and suitable access arrangements. And the DAP might recall those used to be called BEEPs, or evacuation plans. It's now being changed under the recent bushfire requirements, and there is an issue about that if you go to the next slide as to what that means, because we just show the next slide, please. So the site's in red at the moment. There is no access. The site is divided by the north-south railway line, and the access would require the construction of a road from the site, I guess, down to the existing roadway that's positioned around where the yellow crossing is across the railway. And the yellow arrow to the east is the suggested, not precise location, just indicatively that there will be an emergency access through the site adjoining that site to the Goldfields Highway, which Main Roads have said they're happy, but only with an emergency access way. So the two parts of that is it's very constrained access, and it's not normally acceptable to have as a condition the requirement for updates to bushfire management plans, or indeed for preparation of bushfire emergency plans, because they're fundamental to determine whether or not the development is capable of being accommodated. And a key part to that is that the application was not signed by the Crown in relation to the adjoining land. It doesn't form part of the application, so there really can't be any reliance or certainty that that emergency access will in fact be able to be created through to the Goldfields Highway to the east. So this is a fundamental component, and along with the fact that the bushfire report hasn't been updated to meet the current standards, but most importantly hasn't prepared a bushfire emergency plan, we say these are critical elements that really reflect that the site, the proposal is not capable yet to be approved by the DAP. I could move to the next slide. The other aspect, which, look, I won't spend a lot of time on this, I'll just quickly run through what the other component of this, which is the question of the assessment of other available accommodation, because it is a requirement of the council's workforce accommodation policy, as you can see. And the bottom line is it talks about there's a requirement for proposals to be accompanied by information that demonstrates the need. And if you go to the next slide, that identifies what that is. Identifies that, as it's highlighted, the need for beds must be demonstrated in the context of workforce accommodation. And under E, it talks about evidence of occupancy contracts or bookings, which infers that it's not just about permanent accommodation, it's about short stay accommodation also, because there is a makeup of different workforce patrons that would be required to use this facility. And so whilst they may have considered some of the permanent accommodation aspects, they haven't considered the short stay accommodation aspects, and this was one of the areas that the RER had also identified as a shortcoming for the development. And if you can move to the next slide, it shows the location of the development in the context of Kalgoorlie. So you can see it's not remote. It's located within the Kalgoorlie town site, less than 3.5 k's from the main intersection of Lionel Street and Hannon Street. So there's obviously a range of facilities that are already available. So the question of need and availability of services becomes pertinent. So it's not a matter of commercial competition. It doesn't directly compete with short stay accommodation, but one of the aspects is relevant is to the scale and the suitability of the facility, because the council's policy specifically requires this aspect to be addressed. And so not having the full picture in front of the DAP means that we can't really determine the suitability of the proposal or indeed the scale of the facility. And to the extent that it's not covered under the policy, there's also requirements under clause 67N and V of the planning regulations looking at social impacts of the development and the potential loss of community services, which Lisa will speak to. I'll ask you to leave the PowerPoint on for Lisa, if that's okay. But I think in concluding that in the absence of those pieces of information, we don't think that the DAP has enough information that would enable the support for the facility at this juncture. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the DAP might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Did you want to go straight to Lisa's presentation before questions?
I'm happy either way, whatever assists the DAP.
All right. The questions of Steve at this stage? No? Okay, we'll move on to Lisa's presentation. Bearing in mind, I think, Steve, you took about 6 minutes.
Oh, my apologies.
Hi, I'm Lisa O'Donoghue. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. There's a bit of ground to cover though. I'm the General Manager of Ridges Kalgoorlie, and I'm also a Kalgoorlie resident. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I object to the proposed development on the basis of the existing availability of accommodation, the scale of the facility, and the need for the scale of the facility given the available accommodation in the Kalgoorlie town site. The suitability of the facility requires consideration against the town's adopted workforce accommodation policy and clause 67N and V of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, which requires consideration of social impacts of the development and the potential loss of community services resulting from the development, not economic competition. This is specifically relevant as the proposed facility is located so close to the town centre of Kalgoorlie. It's not a remote camp. For reference, it's closer to the CBD than my hotel is. The town has an adopted workforce accommodation policy. Part of that is for developments of 5 years or more, it requires demonstration of significant social and/or community outcomes above those associated with 5-year limitation. It also requires consideration of need. The need for additional beds must be considered against the capacity of existing settlements to meet the accommodation needs. The need for beds must be demonstrated in the context of workforce accommodation provision across the city and industry demand. Assertions that are not substantiated are not to be accepted as the basis. Evidence of occupancy, contracts or bookings may contribute. This has not been done. The officer's summary of the applicant's response shows that they have only looked at the availability of existing permanent residential accommodation, not all available accommodation. This has been reflected by the council's RDAP determination. I'm an experienced short stay accommodation operator in Kalgoorlie. I'm familiar with the availability of accommodation in the town. Mining operations have a multiple of accommodation needs that ranges from FIFO, which is being addressed by this camp, to executive classes with varying lengths of stay, which is more where we deal with. It's not a question of commercial competition because this should not directly compete with us. It's a question of the aspects relevant to the scale and suitability of the facility. Council requires these proposals to be assessed by the availability of other accommodation that would negate the need for the facility or the scale. Accommodation to service the mining industry makes up an important component of overall demand for short stay accommodation. This demand enables provision of short stay accommodation and other facilities that also benefit the broader community. For example, restaurants, conferencing and event facilities, and a licensed resort style pool that we have, which is in regular use by the local community. If that capacity is removed, then it has a potentially significant effect on operators like ourselves to continue to provide these broader services to the overall community. As a snapshot of accommodation vacancy was undertaken in the town, that detail was provided in a planning submission. This was a big undertaking. It involved the cooperation and sharing of sensitive data by multiple businesses for the benefit of the community. Everybody participating in this demonstrates how important it is to the broader community by their involvement. The snapshot looked at the availability of beds from the period of July 2024 to April 2025. 15 of the 22 venues I reached out to had responded at the time of writing with the following findings. The availability of beds ranged from 131 to 515 per night over that period. The average available beds over that period was 287 per night. This suggests that there is capacity to accommodate at least part of the workforce accommodation and mitigate against the overall scale of the facility, especially when considered against the low density coding that applies to the site. This consideration is particularly relevant given the central location of the workforce accommodation. It's not remote, and the requirement to consider the need for the facility under the policy, as well as the social effects of the development.
Lisa, could you wind up? Yeah, okay, thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Questions of either Steve or Lisa, please. Yes.
Hi, Lisa. I'm just trying to get an understanding, and I've read your submission. Are your concerns in your capacity, in your professional capacity associated with the ridges, or is it as in your personal capacity as a resident and concerns you'll be personally impacted by the proposal? Is it more in your professional capacity?
It covers both equally. We've come forward with the data from a professional capacity in that it does impact our ability to run the business. But then in my position as a resident, I'm concerned about the loss of these facilities. You know, my family eat out at restaurants that are associated with hotels on a weekly basis. So the impact that it'll have on these facilities to continue to operate is a concern to me as a resident who wants to have a good quality of life here in Kalgoorlie.
Thank you.
Further questions? Lisa, there appears to be quite a gap between what Northern Star are saying they need 800 beds and your vacancy rate, daily vacancy rate. I mean, how do you reconcile those two things? There's quite a gap.
It speaks to more so the scale of the facility rather than the overall need for the facility. So while I know a lot of other concerns have been addressed, which I hope in due course they're worked through and Northern Star are able to continue their development within a way that doesn't impact the local community. I think the scale of the development needs to be looked at, and that's what the data we provided speaks to. So if they're saying they require 800 beds, do we look at what capacity of that can be filled by the existing accommodation within the local community? Does the development need 800 beds? Would that help alleviate part of the problem with the density that was what the council had in mind for the density of that site?
Thank you.
Yes. Just a follow up based on that response, Lisa. So if the applicant went away and did some extra work on that needs assessment and came back with a good response to the data that you've supplied and that you've mentioned now, and if they came back with a slightly altered proposal, yet the proposal is still what it is, but tailored to respond to the information you've got, would you still have the same concerns you've got now, or would you be more comfortable with approval of the proposal?
If all of the concerns are addressed, we're certainly open to it. Everybody that lives in Kalgoorlie is mindful that it's a mining town, and the success of the mining operators is really essential to the success of the town. I think, though, we do need to look at the length of the approval and how that fits into the needs of the specific project that Northern Star have said this additional accommodation is required for, and that it isn't at a level where the town is impacted by them taking away some of our short stay accommodation. What springs to mind is in Kambalda, for example, once the need for their accommodation went away, they started listing their camps online. Like, you can book them through booking.com, and then they become in direct competition with the short stay accommodation providers, which impacts their ability to provide the services they provide to the town. They have, you know, we provide things, as I said, like conferencing and events. We have weddings, we have Christmas parties are booked at our facility. So us being able to maintain our business is of benefit to the community and will have social impacts if that is taken away.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Further questions of the presenters? No? Okay, thank you, Steve and Lisa.
Thank
we'll
you.
move on to Ben Doyle, who is online. There he is. Ben, you've got 3 minutes, although I've been a bit generous, so over to you.
Ben, you need to unmute.
How many times do you think I need to do that before I learn? Geez, sorry about that, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll keep it brief as I can. As I flagged in my deputation request, we would like to request that the DAP defers this application today to allow us to consider the matters raised by the council resolution, engage further with the elected members, and to address the issues that they raised in the resolution. We have worked closely with the city's officers for almost a year on this project, identifying the site and working to address the city's requirements and recommendations. This has included several meetings and refinements to the design and responding to the city's assessment and external referrals also. And I think that's reflected in the RAR and the officer recommendation, which is supportive. Now, Northern Star is a significant investor and employer in Kalgoorlie and the region. and is a cornerstone of the local economy. Now, there's no dispute that there is a need for this facility, and the project is very important to Northern Star's continued operations. Now, that being said, Northern Star's ongoing relationship with the council is also very important and is highly valued. The matters raised by council's resolution are relevant, and we are confident we can address all of those matters through a combination of either further information and also potentially some modifications to the design. It's important that we take these matters seriously, and I assure you that we do, and that we provide responses that allow the council and this DAP to be fully informed when you make a determination. We are also already underway with those issues and addressing the matters raised in council's resolution. We've had discussions with the city's officers, and they are supportive of our request for a deferral for a period of up to 60 days to engage with the elected members and officers and resolve these matters. So I hope that is acceptable. Nonetheless, if you have any questions or if anything has arisen out of the other deputations, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Questions of Ben?
I did have a question about water, but if you're looking at a deferral, it's obviously one of the issues that you would need to respond to. But I might just pose it to you so that you understand what I was thinking. So the application acknowledges that water allocation is unachievable, and that the development includes 2 large water tanks for potable water, which will be refilled by trucking services. Where would that water come from, Ben? And is there merit in council's concern that this might impact broader water supply in the city?
Thank you for the question. Look, my understanding is that Northern Star has unutilised water allocations, and so there would be the opportunity to use that allocation to provide the water to this facility.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question, if you don't mind. The condition 12 that was provided as part of the officer's recommendation at the back deals with the construction of Kitchener Road and the shared path, as well as the upgrading of various intersections. Are you comfortable that the scope of those works is clearly understood and agreed by yourselves in the city, noting that that might change if the application gets deferred?
Look, we are comfortable that the scope is sufficiently understood for our client to agree to that condition and accept the requirements of it. It has been the subject of some discussion with the city's officers. However, if the panel considers that further clarification is required, that could certainly be addressed as an advice note to the condition if considered necessary. And certainly, certainty is always welcome.
Presiding member, thank you. Ben, just you've suggested a deferral. Have you got a time period in mind as to what you need to be able to address those matters that have been raised by the council of concern?
Up to 60 days would be our request. We as I said, we have made already some progress in considering those matters. They were raised to an extent through the assessment of the application by the officers. So we are already alive to those issues, and we're confident we can deal with them in that time frame.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, just to follow up, Ben, the conversation is sort of headed in the direction of what, if this panel was to defer, what issues need to be covered. Within that 60 days, are you comfortable that you would be able to respond to the issues raised by the other submitters, specifically the occupancy issues and the impact on other short stay businesses that are critical to the economic viability of Kalgoorlie outside of the mining sector?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillors? Yes, Councillor Turner.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions, but the first one I'm going to direct to Ben is that given that you're asking for a deferral, I'm really interested in the zoning issues and that it's R10. How are we going to overcome those in 60 days? Because that was a significant concern to councillors when the item was discussed. How in 60 days would we overcome that? Because that's for me, that's one of our significant factors.
Sorry, councillor, I'm not quite clear on what you refer to as the zoning issue. The previous, sorry, go ahead.
So, okay, so that it has to discretionary use, but the lot was set aside for permanent housing, and I'm not sure if at any stage Northern Star has considered putting permanent housing in there rather than a camp. I understand you're looking at volume of putting short stay and workforce accommodation. You're looking at volume per rooms. However, this could also be achieved if Northern Star did a permanent style housing accommodation village there and had have invested in that, because that's what it was zoned for.
Yes, certainly. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Look, the use of workforce accommodation has previously been determined to be a residential use, and so for that reason, it is consistent with the residential zoning and is capable of being approved in the residential zone. Quite simply, there is just not the ability to construct 400 or 800 beds in the form of permanent housing on that site or on any site within the time frame that's required by Northern Star to maintain their operations. So the intent is for the workers' accommodation, as is the nature of workers' accommodation, is to accommodate short and medium term peaks and troughs in demand to accommodate those operations.
So my follow-up question was so is Northern Star saying they need 800 beds immediately? Because that's my question. Or is it I thought it was a staged process with their construction that you needed the potential of 800 beds.
Well, no, the intent is for the 800 beds to be provided as part of this development. Now, the finer points of Northern Star bringing on various projects, I'm certainly not able to respond to that. That's not an area of my expertise, but there is certainly a requirement for the 800 beds as part of this facility. With regard to the previous subdivision approval, and we weren't involved in that for the residential subdivision of this site, my understanding and from the officers, and they may wish to clarify this if they're asked, but my understanding is that part of the reason that has not proceeded, by our understanding, is that there was significant costs associated with servicing the site. Now, obviously, as part of this application, we will be providing those services to the site, and so including extending Kitchener Road. And so that will potentially leave a legacy that will allow for the future residential permanent subdivision of the site following the cessation of this use.
Right, okay, so then another follow-up question I've had, that in the application it says that Main Roads hasn't been supportive of having access to Goldfields Highway, and this was brought up with one of the previous presenters, and I know it was a concern as well when it was discussed at council with the bushfire plan. How certain are we that this extension to Kitchener Road covers that? Because we clearly have no access to Goldfields Highway there, and that's not just for the bushfire plan, that's for transport in of water, transport in of fuel for your generators. That Kitchener Road is, even though it's going to have an extension of Kitchener Road and it's going to be upgraded, there's going to be a lot of traffic on that, and I'm not certain that the traffic management plan covers some of those issues, because especially that transporting in and out of the water and the transporting in and out of fuel and the storage of fuel. We're not having access to Goldfields Highway, to me, is a significant issue there, and Main Roads has already refused that.
Sure. Okay, a couple of points there. With regard to the bushfire access, our bushfire consultant is a level 3 practitioner, and has confirmed that under the bushfire regulations, this is not a vulnerable land use, and in fact does not require emergency access to Goldfields Highway. And so the access proposed and the bushfire reporting that's been undertaken is in fact greater, to a higher level than is required under the new policy framework. Notwithstanding, it would be to rule out one of these points that has been raised in the council resolution, I expect we will be updating the bushfire reporting to the point where it is then consistent with the requirements that changed following the original bushfire reporting that was done. Secondly, then, with regard to just general traffic on Kitchener, and sorry, the screen moved there. With regard to the traffic on Kitchener, the numbers that we have based the traffic assessment on are very, very conservative. The advice from Northern Star is that the actual traffic movements will be orders of magnitude less than what has been modelled in the traffic report, which has been done, as I say, is a very conservative modelling exercise. And what it concludes is that there is ample capacity in the road network to cater for the anticipated demand, even the elevated anticipated demand that was being modelled. In that regard, then, there's no need for access to Goldfields Highway. And the thing to bear in mind, I guess, with this modelling, it arrives at a figure, I think, from memory, of 168 vehicles per hour in the peak hour. Now, when you talk those numbers, that sounds like a lot. But in fact, in the course of my 3-minute deputation, that equates to 8 vehicles. So that is not a significant number of traffic movements, and that is the peak hour. So all other hours were modelled as being likely to be less. So we're very confident, based on expert advice, that we can service the site with vehicles and movements without requiring upgrades to the local road network beyond the extension to Kitchener Road, which we have committed to.
Further questions, councillors?
If I may, Presiding Officer.
Yes, Councillor Winner.
Thank you. Councillor Terence Winner from the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder. Just a question through to Mr. Doyle. Mr. I'll probably draw back, while I can understand the request that you've made to consider an additional 60 days to work through some of the items that were raised, I still find it, I have a very different interpretation understanding in regards to land use permissibility. So I recognise that the land has been zoned as residential. However, under local town planning scheme number 2, workforce accommodation is listed as a use within residential. Therefore, it is not permittable unless local government has exercised discretion to approve subject to advertising, which has not occurred. I'm curious to see your understanding around this and why you feel that it is permissible in a residential area.
The A use indicates that it is capable of being approved in the residential zone. The workforce accommodation is not a permitted as of right use in any zone in the city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder under the scheme. It has been advertised for public comment, as you're aware, and so the discretion exists for the application to be approved.
Provided that discretion has gone through local government, is that correct?
Provided that the decision maker exercises discretion, yes.
And has that occurred today?
That is the decision that is being put to the development assessment panel.
Thank you.
Further questions, councillors? No, any more questions? No. Thank you, Ben. We'll move on to the officers. I guess somewhere.
Presiding member, it's Paul Lee speaking. We can't seem to get the video up and running. Do you need to give us access to that? Oh, hold it. Here we go. Oh, yeah. All right. Here we go.
Okay.
This is Paul Lee's manager of development and growth, and Kevin is next to me. Kevin is the coordinator.
Thank you.
Kevin's effectively we're the author of the report. I'm co-author, and so we're both obviously have prepared it together and finalised it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Are there any general comments you want to make before we go to questions?
Yeah, a couple of things, if I may. Thank you, presiding member. I hope the clarity around workforce accommodation being an AUs and that being capable of approved under discretion, I trust that's been clarified. in that case, I think we all agree that the local authority or decision maker in this case is the DAP, and consistent with our thinking. It was advertised extensively. We were particularly careful to advertise it, particularly where the Kitchener Road upgrading, where it abuts and joins with the city's road network. So there was extensive advertising of those residents who would be impacted by the additional traffic movements. We had the transport impact assessment peer reviewed by I3 Consultants. David's undertakes extensive auditing for Main Roads WA. He's the eminent traffic engineer, and he provided us with his own assessment and undertook said remodelling that gave us the level of service for A and B at those intersections. So from the city's point of view, provided constructed correctly to the city standards, main road standards, and that that one difficult intersection is upgraded appropriately, which the applicant has agreed. We believe that the traffic impacts will be acceptable. We also work closely initially with the applicant to ensure that the buffers were in place in regard to bushfire, that their bushfire plan, we've had that reviewed, and we've conditioned that that be updated to comply with the new standards. We also acknowledge the fact that the railway itself forms a significant buffer. We understand why Main Roads would not have wanted a right turn across the highway. We also accept the fact that that would have been a better planning outcome, but we understand that that level of friction in the highway and those movements would be a problem. So we've taken a pragmatic approach to that. We also probably need to advise the panel that currently there is a track to the site, fairly close to the railway alignment, and that the upgrading of Kitchener Road is a significant piece of work. It's nothing more than a goat track at the moment. It will require clearing of weed and scrub, essentially, because it's been cleared at some stage. There's little remnant woodland vegetation along that alignment, but we understand that a significant amount of work will be required to actually form Kitchener Road, and also there have been, as pointed out in the RAR, there have been or there is a number of subdivision approvals over the site. Those approvals have required the formation of Kitchener Road and also of a sewer, and we believe that the economics of development haven't stacked up previously, and that whether it was a 5 or 10-year approval, that infrastructure obviously will make the site more attractive to further residential development in the future. So that's about it, I think, from my comments.
Thank you, Paul. I'll go to the councillors first to see if you've got any questions of the officers.
So I have a question for our officers, and it relates directly to our workforce accommodation policy, and it's the room size in it. So for approval for a 10-year development, the room size isn't compliant at all, and for some reason, in this case, the balcony's been taken into consideration, and I believe that sets a precedent that we've never had that thing, that the room sizes clearly don't meet our workforce accommodation policy for a 10-year plan. So can you explain where you were thinking that would be okay?
Yes, through the presiding member, we've been advised that those units are a typical modular unit that is used in a mining camp. And I think they fall short of about 1.8 square metres per room. We understand they're consistent with other recently approved mining camps within the city. And we've accepted the fact that in the mining camps that other than sleeping in the units, that the people that reside in them do spend a lot of time both within the facility but also within the balconies. In this case, the balconies face towards the landscape, and the policy is something to be seriously considered. And I think there has been agreement that it requires renewal, and it's something that we would look at going forward. But however, we do not believe that that small shortfall was fatally flawed in terms of an approval of the application.
Thank you. Further questions? No further questions? Yes, Tony.
You've heard the applicant's request for a deferral. Do you have a view about that?
Thank you. Yes, through the presiding member. Look, we support that. Clearly, they want to work with council. I think the 60 days could be a little bit tight. It's depending on council's availability and the model of communication, consultation, and agreement. I think probably, and obviously that's not resolved or planned at this stage, that whilst the proponent says 60 days will be suitable, it would be unfortunate to run out of days and have to come back again to the panel. I suppose my view and understanding the commitments of the city and the program of council meetings, 90 days might be more suitable, but we support 60 days if that's what is suggested.
Further questions? Yes.
Yes, I have a few questions if you don't mind. So reason for refusal number 4 is demonstrated adequate preparedness for room typology for a 10-year approval. And that didn't really make sense to me. Does that align with what Councillor Turner was asking about the room size?
Yes. Look, through the presiding member, there are a set of criteria there in the policy, which suggests that for a 10-year approval rather than a 5, there should be a higher level of amenity. Another requirement that hasn't been discussed is the roof pitch. Now, the roof pitch is something which is, again, is a modular unit and suitable for transport. However, as I explained, we didn't feel that the 1.8, I think it's 1.88 metres, would be a fatal flaw in terms of the approval. I presume, and I think probably rightly so, that Northern Star Resources have a good understanding of the sorts of units that their workforce live in and enjoy, and that's consistent with it. That policy was developed in 2023 as part of the Gazette of the New Scheme, and obviously going forward, we would undertake extensive research in terms of reviewing that. But as I say, we felt that with the balconies imposed and the ability to enjoy the balconies and the outdoor component of the camp, we felt that wasn't a matter to be that would fatally flaw the application.
Thank you. And this, you don't need to respond to this at length. If the panel goes with a deferral, this might be something you'd want to address in your report coming forward. But under Section 5 of your workforce accommodation policy, what is the type of social or community outcome that would usually be expected within a 5-year time limited approval, and what extra type of benefit would you expect to see for an approval for more than 5 years?
That's through the presiding member. That's probably something we haven't tested. The workforce accommodation on Vivian and Hopkins Street were recently approved for a further 5 years, giving them a 10-year life by council. We felt that for the 10-year life, that the amenity of those units were particularly good, and including the internal landscaping and the facilities provided. It does talk about street frontages, high quality form. Well, we've got no established streetscape here. This, in fact, remediates an area that's basically an old mining site and creates a new environment. We required, and it was agreed by the proponent, that there be street tree planting to New Kitchener Road within the road reserve, to actually assist going forward when the subdivision, future subdivision, well, there actually are subdivision plans approved, and when that proceeds to development, at least there'd be some structural landscape in place that would assist that. Overall, we felt that the quality proposed within the site actually met those general requirements and specific requirements for the additional 5 years.
Thank you. You've provided a description of the contribution that Northern Star has already made in the community as justification for compliance with Section 5 of your policy. Have you had conversations, or has council had conversations with the applicant whether this level of contribution is expected to continue into the future?
The presiding member, no, not directly, and maybe that is something that councillors can respond to. They are, as Mr. Doyle said, the biggest player in town.
Okay, thank you. Just last thing from me, on page 9 of your report, you state that the application has demonstrated the need for the proposed development, but one of council's reasons of refusal is the failure to provide a needs assessment as per Section 3. Could you comment on that for me, please?
Yes, through the presiding member. They haven't done an assessment against the consideration of workers staying in hotels. And I note that the comment was made previously that there are executive workers that could and probably should stay in hotels to help support the industry, and I thought that was a valid comment. The assumption has been by the city is that these will be workers who work on the mine site on a regular basis, and there's 2 shifts. So they'll be bussed from the site to, and there'll be a changeover, and the shifts are usually, I think, around 6 in the morning, and then another one at late evening. So we've accepted their analysis of rental accommodation available. I don't think anybody would want to see Northern Star Resources take up all the rental accommodation. It's the costs associated with that are particularly high at the moment. So we've accepted the fact that they have a need, and that, as they said, from an operational perspective, that need is accommodated well in a workforce camp. But I am open to the fact that there may be other workers, executive workers, specialists who are travelling to the site from time to time, that they could stay in hotels, and that would obviously support the economy of the city.
Thank you. Nothing.
Just on that, Paul, is that the sort of conversation that you can have with Northern Star as part of the needs analysis if the matter was deferred?
Yes, of course, and I would, without putting words into the councillors' mouths, I'd never do that, but I would expect that that's probably something they would want to investigate as well. Just beyond that, if I may, the shared path, the 2.5 metre shared path, we felt that was an important component. We have some workforce accommodation camps just up the road from the city. In fact, I think there was an amendment recently to one of those, which has been approved by RDAP. And these workers do get out of the camps. They do move around the city. They do walk to town. They do cycle and scooter around. And we just felt that was an important connection with the city. And as said earlier, it's only a few k's. There's options for movement through to the Hammonds Boulevard and also into the pubs and clubs and accommodation and food services and other retail offering within the city, as well as the opportunity to cross and enjoy Kalgoorlie Park Nature Reserve, which is very close to it. So overall, we felt that infrastructure was quite important as a connection, and obviously going forward would add significant connectivity to new housing estate on that land.
Thank you. One last question from me, Paul. Did you manage to prepare a draft deferral?
Yes, we have sent that through, and it agrees with the 60 days.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, no further questions. We'll move to the item. There is a responsible authority report with a recommendation for refusal, which is the first one I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for. Is there a mover for the refusal? Yes, Councillor Winner, thank you. Is there a seconder? Yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll be moving to adopt the recommendation as just discussed to refuse the DAP application for the several reasons outlined below in regards to non-compliancy. I feel there's not enough demonstration that the site located and selected for this development is compliant with a number of different areas of required policy and compliancy areas. And I would not feel that, given the work and requirements we've placed on other developments or similar developments, this does not stack up against that. So I won't be in support of that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, a seconder.
Yeah, so I'll speak as seconder. I support Councillor Winner's motion. The points are very clear that have been laid out. There was also significant discussion on the night highlighting the reasoning behind those, the points that have been included. To be honest, I haven't seen, all emotion was taken out on the night when the discussion was there. It was just black and white. That councillors looked at it, and the fact that one of the things that concerned me with the deferral, well, it's great that Northern Star wants to work with the council on these issues, but there was 140 plus submissions here, and also I'd be concerned about their relationship with the community, that hasn't also been demonstrated here. I know you can't look at that, but there's a lot of things. The water and power not being available is huge. The use of generators there, that I don't know if they've been taken into consideration in the noise assessment, and it keeps being highlighted how close to town it is. It's close to a lot of residential properties as well. So there's several things there, and those 6 points I think are pretty clear on why I'm seconding the motion.
Thank you. Seeking a speaker against or another speaker? Yes.
Thank you. Look, I'm not comfortable to support the refusal of this application, and I've foreshadowed that if the motion is lost, I would be comfortable with a deferral for us to have another good look at this. But I'll speak very briefly for the record, as to why I don't support the reasons for refusal at this point. Reason one, non-compliance with the zoning and land use permissibility. The proposal clearly aligns with the definition of workforce accommodation, and it's an A use in the residential zone. And essentially that means this use is capable of approval by this panel if the proposal's been advertised, which it has, and if the panel feels that the proposed use is consistent with the objectives of the residential zone. So density is a nuance, but it almost gets set aside when you're looking at an alternative type of use in the residential zone. The city's report doesn't specifically contain an assessment of the proposed use against the objectives of the residential zone. So I did my own brief assessment, and I'll very quickly move through that. The first objective is to provide for a range of housing and housing and a choice of residential densities to meet the needs of the community. I don't think this proposal is at odds with that. It's providing much needed housing to meet the needs of a specific sector of the city's population. Second objective is to facilitate and encourage high quality design, build form and streetscape. While the form of accommodation is not typical residential design, I think the immediate surrounds of the site are vacant. There's no established or existing build form or streetscape character that would be impacted by a non-permanent use like this. If anything, the proposed landscaping and amenities could bring some relief to the existing streetscape character. And the third objective is to provide for a range of non-residential uses which are compatible with and complementary to residential development. And I think that the amenities provided as part of this do support that. So I just struggle to accept that reason one in itself is a justifiable or defensible reason for refusal of the application. Reason two is non-compliance with the city's workforce accommodation policy, particularly section 5. Of the time limited approval section and failure to provide a needs assessment as per section 3. But from the reading of the report, it appears the proposal will result in connection of the site to the local sewer network, extension of Kitchener Road to the site and construction of a shared path, all of which will surely encourage and contribute to the viability of future residential development on the site. And from what I hear from the city's officers, there is a bit of a struggle to get that off the ground at the minute, probably because of all those works that need to be done. There is also some commentary in the report about need, and I accept that a formal needs assessment hasn't been done, but on the face of it, the information provided to us in the report demonstrates that there is a need. But I do accept that there's more work that can be done in that area. I just don't think it's enough to refuse the application at this stage. Reason 3 is concerns over the impact on the local road network, and I think that the most recent traffic information provided indicates that although there will be around 944 vehicle movements per day, they're not all going to happen at the same time. It gives me comfort as well that the city had that peer reviewed by a different consultant who supports that. Given that, I again struggle to use the impact on the local road network as a reason to refuse. To defer for more information, fine, but to refuse is not strong enough. Reason 4, as I said, is a bit confusing for me, and if that relates to room sizes, again, I wouldn't be comfortable using reason 4 to refuse such a significant development. I would need more information on why that is enough. Bushfire, reason 5, we've heard varying opinions on bushfire. I understand that the bushfire is not up to scratch in terms of the city's expectations or the guidelines. That can be conditioned with an application like this to the city's satisfaction. So the applicant could go away and do some more detailed bushfire planning and assessment and come back. And if the city's happy with it as a condition, the development could go ahead. If they were not happy with it, then the development would not go ahead. So I'm not comfortable with reason 5 as a reason for refusal at this point. And reason 6 is water sustainability and city impact. I understand this as a concern, but again, I'm not sure I'd be able to refuse this whole development on that basis. Water will be needed and the project won't proceed if it's broadly unavailable. So again, I don't think that's a strong enough reason for refusal. So in summary, I don't think the reasons for refusal are solid enough to warrant a refusal, and foreshadow that if that motion is lost, I'll support the alternate for a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers? Tony.
Thank you, presiding member. Member Page has provided very detailed reasons why she cannot support the motion, and I would endorse that. We also have a comprehensive RAR which outlines reasons why the application should actually be supported. So on that basis, I am uncomfortable with supporting a refusal. Equally, I think the application needs probably some clarity in terms of conditions, which we could do through the process, but I think a deferral to enable further consultation and refinement would be more appropriate. presiding member, is it appropriate now to move an alternative motion?
Well, it's certainly a deferral. You can
Deferral?
move a deferral.
Okay, well, in which case I would like to actually move a procedural motion to defer the application for up to 90 days. I know it's been suggested, so it provides flexibility, but up to 90 days to enable the applicant to address and provide additional information on the nominated grounds for refusal 1 to 6.
Thank you. Is there a second? Yes, thank you, Dale. That's seconded. It's a procedural motion, so I'll now put the motion to defer. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. That ends the debate on that matter. I'll just finish the meeting off then. There's no Forms 2, there's no Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. There are some SAT matters outstanding though. And I'll close the meeting at 11:38. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, listen to us. Very persuasive, Paul.